You've tuned into the season finale of Mindblowers, and trust us, we've saved the absolute best for last. This isn't just any episode. We're counting down the top 15 wildest future trends of 2024, the breakthroughs and innovations that will reshape our world. Think artificial intelligence, humanoid robots, extended lifespans, self-driving cars, and so much more. To guide us through this mind-bending journey, we have not one but two incredible experts: best-selling author and futurist Lars Tvede, and your host, former Facebook executive and super trends expert Daniel Kafer. Let's dive headfirst into the top 15 future trends.
Welcome to this special edition of Mindblowers. 2024 is coming to an end, and it's time to do a review of 2024 and talk about some of the wild and crazy future trends that we experienced this year. Once again, we have Lars Tvede as our guest. Hi, Lars.
Hi.
Yeah, so I think we both view 2024 as pretty crazy, but it's actually pretty hard to pick the most wild 15 future trends, but we have done our best. So the first one we picked is robotics. So we're cheating a little bit here because robots didn't really come in 2024, at least not for sale in terms of the humanoid robots. But it was really interesting to see a lot of the YouTube videos with, for example, the new robot called X1. We can see it here in the picture. It's very human-like. What do you think, Lars? Do you think we'll see robots in homes in 2025 maybe?
No, I think that where it really starts to become a mass market is around 2028. But before that, we'll see some amazing robots. They just have to come down in price, be mass produced, and also people have to figure out how to use them. But from 2028 and onwards, I think it will begin to become a massive infusion of extra labor force for the world economy. So the reason it's important in 2024 is just that we saw these quite astonishing demonstrations from China, from Norway, from US and other places where we begin to be able to see that this is going to be big.
That actually leads us to trend number 14, which is China.
China, yeah. So I've been twice in China in 24. Main reason is that I've sold an insane amount of books in China. I actually wasn't aware of that until I arrived there, and my publisher told me that. There's a report that came out a couple of years ago, which was updated with more data in 2024, and it's from Australian Strategic Policy Institute. And they did this study for the military alliance called Five Eyes. And they had identified 64 technologies that are critical for the world economy in the future, and they wanted to investigate which regions in the world were dominating on these different technologies, China or Europe or the US. And they found that out of 64 technologies, China was leading the world on 57. I just don't think that is widely enough appreciated. There are still lots of people who think that China is just copying Western stuff. They never come out with anything leading. They just do cheaper versions of what the West has invented. We are a bit beyond that now, and it's just very important.
True, you just can't get around China. We're also seeing them with the EVs now really starting to dominate markets. So our point number 13 is actually AI video and AI pictures. And here we actually also saw China entering the market. But let me start with the beginning of 2024 that started pretty much with a bang because OpenAI, they introduced Sora, but they didn't launch it. And Sora looked just like amazing AI video, like a leap forward. And excitement turned into disappointment because then nothing happened. It wasn't released.
That was in February, right?
Exactly. That was in February. And nothing really happened in that space until about June. And then suddenly a lot happened. We had the Chinese competitor called Kling that was quite a lot better than Runway Gen 2 that was the best at that point. Then you had Luma Dream Machine, and then Runway, that was kind of the gold standard. In 23, they launched their Generation 3, which is also, I mean, they were all, I think, pretty similar, those three competitors, and better than what was available before. Then Sora finally came in December, and for me it was kind of a disappointment. But then Google has launched VEO 2, which looks like a Sora killer. It simply looks amazing.
It's actually been, in terms of innovation, it's been an amazing year for Google because they also came up with Willow, which we are going to talk about later. So the next thing is Agentic AI. And so just for those who may not know, Agentic AI is AI based on that people combine a number of different AI agents, which are like small intellectual robots, you can say. And you can find transformers and agents. So transformers are language processing. Transformers replicate some parts of what or how the human brain see how things are connected, and agents they actually do stuff. And so if you go into a website called huggingface.com, you at the end of 2024, we find more than 1.2 million different transformers and agents that are publicly available. And that number has been growing so fast that if we extrapolate it to the end of next year, end of 25, there should be more than 6 million of these. And big business activity in 25 will surely be to build machines that combine these. So I'm founder and chairman of a company called Supertrends, where we do exactly that. So I have seen what it can do hands-on, and we use this to track and map and predict global innovation. And so we have this software, which is like a scaffold where you can very, very quickly, very easily put in different agents that point to other agents. And also we have about 300 prompts, and we can insert prompts like literally within minutes. And they all talk to each other. And this software does some work that would normally require 500 people's effort nonstop, 24/7. And it just runs automatically, and it only costs us electricity. We are not even paying for tokens on the net for that. So I'm very bullish on this area, and I'm certainly not alone on that. So this is really exploding and could easily be forgotten because it's not so. I mean, it's people talk a lot more about the big LLMs and graphical programs and so on, but this will really have very big business impact.
Did you see how Claude is now able to actually control a computer? So you can make it kind of your IT expert and basically say, please take over my computer, just like an IT expert, and then actually fix the issues you have?
I have not seen that, but it's relevant for what we have seen. One of the things that Google have launched, which is OpenAI 01 and 03. They skipped 02, but these are reasoners, as it's now called in the business, which means that it's AI that works more like an academic, where you have a structured thinking, you have iterative thought process, you can go back and change something you concluded before, and so on. This is something that I think is also underappreciated, which is that it's not only about how much data the models are trained on, but it's how they think, and how they think is getting improved incredibly right now. And Google is one of the companies that are really on the forefront of that.
Okay, let's now jump to number 11, which is one of the kind of crazy ones. And that is that AI is entering the space of romantic relationships. And I actually researched this, and I kind of thought, well, this will be far in the future. But it turned out that they had surveyed people in their 20s, and 25% of people in their 20s thought that AI would have potential to be their romantic partners in the future, in their life. And then I researched a little bit more, and it actually turns out that especially young men are desperate on the dating scene at the moment. Do you know how many times you need to swipe right, which means say yes, on Tinder, just to get about 5 dates if you're a man?
If it's me, then one. No, I'm not on Tinder.
Yeah,
I have,
but
I have
if
no,
you're the
I have no
average
idea.
young guy, it's 10,000 times. So I can
Wow.
kind of understand why it sounds quite attractive to start dating AI and robots. But I was really stunned that 25% of the young generation would consider this.
So let's move on to number 10 on our list. And so our list is not only about things that are going well, it's also things that are going bad for somebody or for everybody. So this one is about Russia's arms export. So I'm not sure if you know these numbers, but I'll tell you some numbers that I found. So in 2010, Russia delivered about 27% of global arms export. In 2023, it had dropped to 10%. Do you know how much it's estimated to be in 2024?
I don't know, but I'm guessing a lot lower.
Or 4.4%. So they're pretty much wiped out of the global arms export market, and this is important for a number of reasons. One of the reasons, of course, purely economic, but the other thing is that if you are exporting arms, then you have what you call soft power because people have to be approved to import your arms. So geopolitically, it's a very strong tool to be a strong arms exporter. So Russia lost that partly because, lately because they're so desperate to get access to arms themselves that they don't have capacity to export. And I saw some Indian television where they were complaining that India had ordered some arms from Russia and they were not delivered and they were postponed. But the other thing is that I once worked in a startup where I had this partner. He was a very experienced entrepreneur, and he said, most important when you start a company is that you need to have a product that's really nice and easy to demonstrate. So the problem for Russia is that the efficiency of the arms have just been demonstrated in live action in different countries, in the Ukraine and Russia, but also, for instance, in Iran, when Iran attacked Israel and then Israel attacked back. So what happened when Iran attacked Israel? They hit nothing. They killed one Palestinian, and that was it. But then Israel attacks back, and Israel has American arms mainly, and they wipe out the entire air defense of Iran within no time at all. Lose no airplanes. They had about 100 airplanes in the air to do that. Lose not a single airplane. And it just shows that these Russian air defense systems are highly inefficient. And we see the same when Ukraine again and again are sending drones, sometimes super primitive homemade drones, deep into Russia where they destroy different things. And Russia apparently is unable to do anything about it. So this means that we know that we are in an era now where there will be rearming. Because of geopolitical risk, the NATO will spend a lot more on arms than they did before, etc. And it means that the arms industry in other countries are picking up what Russia has dropped. This is high tech, so it's actually a big tech story that not so many people are focused on. But I thought it was interesting.
Let's now take number 9. And number 9, I call it the demise of Europe. So we've talked with a lot of interesting people here on the Mindblowers podcast. I think many of them, they mention the same, that, China is really at the forefront, and so is the US, but Europe is not. And we can also see this from the GDP numbers. Europe and the EU used to be at the same size at the US, but we are not near that anymore. We are at around 15% now of the world economy. And we missed out on the tech boom, and now it seems we're missing out on the AI and the robotics boom. So Europe will just be a less important continent as I see it in the decades to come.
Yeah, and I think another part of that is on energy. So one thing we know is that if you want to build wealth, you need to have access to more and more energy. And in China, they are actually working on about 30 different nuclear reactors, and they have plans for 150 in total. And it's why it's ramping up in the US also. But in Europe, you have the opposite. So you have Germany that's shut down perfectly functional. nuclear reactors. You have Spain talking about doing the same and so on. So that will just bring Europe even further back. And European electricity prices are now way, way higher than American and Chinese. And that means what it means is that industrial production just moves out of Europe. It doesn't disappear. It just moves to where the electricity is cheaper. So we hope that there will be an awakening in Europe. But I'm a bit doubtful, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we both are. So that leads us to point number 8, which is actually fusion energy.
Yeah, so you and I have spent a lot of time on fusion, and we did a recent interview with Milena, the head of the European Fusion Association, who is also the CEO of Gauss Fusion, big fusion startup in Europe. What we have seen in 2024 is a fair amount of fairly specific announcements of when different startups expect to go commercial. The most bullish is Helion, which say they will do it in 2028. You have Commonwealth Fusion, which is an extremely well-funded company that is quite far, and they are talking about in the early 2030s, and they are specific about where the first reactor will be and so on. There's a startup in New Zealand recently that came out and said they expect to be commercial within 6 years. Now, you and I and everybody knows that startup companies have a tendency to be over-optimistic. Perhaps they believe what they say, but they have this tendency. But there are serious companies, and for instance, if you take Helion, Helion's chairman is none less than Sam Altman, who was the CEO of OpenAI, which made GPT, and who was before that heading Y Combinator, which is the world's leading accelerator. So they also had the deal that they announced was with Microsoft, which is also a serious company. So Microsoft would buy the electricity. You get a sense that it's real. It will happen. There are more and more different concepts being developed. If you look at surveys among the members of the International Futures Association, most of them, they expect within 10 to 15 years we have commercial fusion. Milena was a little bit more skeptical. She said that somewhere between 35 and 45. It will completely change the energy landscape and have big impact on the world economy. So it's very interesting.
So we'll stay on the energy topics. So we're going to talk about natural hydrogen.
Yes. So natural hydrogen is a phenomenon that nobody talked about until fairly recently. So the world is full of hydrogen. The human body is the vast majority of the atoms inside your body and mine are hydrogen. It's the most common atom in the universe. But hydrogen in the ambient environment around us is always connected to something else. So it doesn't exist in its free form because it's so super reactive. But it turns out that in the underground, in the Earth's crust, there's actually a lot of natural hydrogen in the free form, and it develops because of radioactivity and because of water meeting iron and the iron rust, and then it releases this hydrogen. So it's trapped in different pockets like natural gas. We are now beginning to see surveys, and we've seen quite a lot of predictions in 2024 that are increasingly bullish. So, for instance, the U.S. Geological Survey has recently estimated that there are 10 million megatons. So a megaton is a million tons. So 10 million tons of natural hydrogen available in the Earth's subsurface. And they say, if 1% of that can be extracted commercially, then it would meet the Earth's global demand for about 200 years. If 5% can be extracted, then it will have more punch, more energy potential than all fossil fuel combined. So we don't have so much specific information about it yet, but it's certainly an area where I would say watch that space. So hydrogen is difficult to handle. But if we have that much, then we will use and build the infrastructure to handle it. And some of the infrastructure we have used for fossil fuel, especially natural gas, can be used or can be upgraded to handle hydrogen. And there's a lot of aspects of what do we do with it. If we want to power a ship with hydrogen, do we convert it into ammonia? We probably do, and then which is a fluid, which is much easier to handle, and lots of details, but it's interesting.
So now we're going to move to something completely different. Number 6 is the large language models. And I did some research on this. It actually felt like that much didn't really happen when you look at 2024 because ChatGPT 4 was actually released in 2023. But then when you actually look at how we use, for example, ChatGPT today, it's totally different. So this year you can send pictures to ChatGPT, it can interpret the pictures, you can send them, you can send complex math problems, you can talk in like an everyday conversation with ChatGPT. So it has improved heaps and bounds, especially when it comes to reasoning and math. So it's become much more reliable than it was 1 year ago. And also the tasks you can actually feed the language models with today are much larger. We measure this in the token context window that has increased from just a few thousand till now 1 million.
Okay, the next one is computer hardware. So much going on. I just think there are two really important things that happened in the last year. Of course, Nvidia is completely over the moon. Unbelievably efficient what they're producing. So if you take their A100 GPU, this has 54 billion transistors. We looked a little bit at if you make a cluster of server park with 2,000 of these, how much data processing power does it have? And it actually has about 200,000 times the data processing power of the human brain. And that means, we are simplifying things here, but we're surely getting into a situation where we have enough computer hardware to make hyperintelligence. The hardware will continue to get better for a long time at an exponential rate, but it's more software problem than a hardware problem. And I personally think that we will have, in my definition of hyperintelligence, that we'll see that in 2025 or 26. I know that I've seen some definition of what is hyperintelligence that says that hyperintelligence is whatever we haven't solved yet. So they just keep moving the definition ahead of what we've actually solved. But I would say if the measured IQ of a computer that takes IQ tests is beyond 160, then it's beyond any human that you are ever likely to personally meet, or perhaps it's beyond any living human in the entire world. And then if it also has access to more information, many orders of magnitude more information that any human can possibly have, and is able to operate a computer, as you mentioned earlier, and if it's able to think like a reasoner, then I think that would meet my definition of hyperintelligence. And yeah, I think it's 25 or 26. The other big hardware breakthrough was Willow, again, Google. So Willow is a new a quantum computing chip. And it just did a calculation that would have taken the biggest traditional computer in the world 10, 10 septillion years, which is much longer time that the universe has existed or possibly will exist. And it did that in 5 minutes. So this is no immediate practical implications because the calculation is actually of no use. It's kind of chosen to be extremely suitable for quantum computing. But what it does tell us is that quantum computing is really moving ahead at a very high speed. And mainstream predictions are that maybe around 2032, 2033, somewhere in that vicinity, quantum computing will have practical, commercially useful products. And at that time, we will be way, way, way beyond what I define as hyperintelligence. So it will still be hyperintelligence, but it will be hyperintelligence which is orders of magnitude better than anything a human brain can do. So yeah, it's a little bit like nuclear fusion, where just we get confirmation from the experimental products that are being developed that this is clearly on track.
So on to the next one. I actually had the Demise of Europe twice, so we're really serious about that one. But I'll replace it with the introduction of robo-taxis. I'm really excited about the idea of robo-taxis and a world where we can have maybe less than 10% of the cars we actually have in the moment, because we can use a form of an app just like Uber, and we'll have robo-taxis showing up. And we're seeing this in many American cities at the moment, San Francisco, for example, being one. So what about you? Do you believe in the robo-taxis for the future?
Yeah, so autodrive has been a problem that has been far harder to solve than many people expected, including Elon Musk. But they are getting there. And you have level 4 where cars can drive autonomously, except in very complicated environments, and then level 5 where they can do it everywhere. And I think that level 4 is clearly technically possible right now. And versus Germany also wants to be quite liberal and release that on highways or make it legal on highways, etc. So this is very important because people spend a lot of time driving, and they spend a lot of money on cars. So this is a big thing, I think.
Yes. So on to number 3. We call it the green flop. Can you explain what that is, Lars?
Yeah. Okay. So many people talk about sustainable energy and green energy and renewable energy. And then what they're thinking about is biomass and solar and wind. But if you look at statistics of how much success we've had with that, if we throw in hydro as a part of renewable, then solar, wind, biomass, and hydro 20 years ago was about 10% of the global energy supply, and today it's about 10% of global energy supply. And you can wonder, how is that possible? Because we have invested so much in solar and wind. Why does the number grow? And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you cannot increase hydro and biofuel very much. So we are kind of hitting the roof of how much we can do of that. So we do increase wind and solar quite a lot, but we run into some problems with them because they are not stable. If you look at different economic studies, they seem to suggest that if somewhere around 20% of the electricity supply in a country comes from solar and wind, then it becomes really, really a big complication that sometimes they deliver nothing. So that you cannot depend on it becomes more and more expensive the bigger fraction of the electricity supply they deliver. So let's say that's 20% of electricity supply. Do you know how much of global total energy supply is electricity?
I think it's only about 20%, right?
Yeah. So if 20% is a pain level, 20% of electricity is a pain level, that becomes 4% of global energy supply. So I have this personal forecast that I don't think that renewables will ever exceed 15% of global energy supply. And I think what we're likely to see is that they get close to that and then they start to level off. So we need something else. We need nuclear. But both you and I, we are both Danish nationals, and because of that, and because we follow the area in general, we're quite aware of what we've seen in Central and Northern Europe just in 2024. You've seen wildly fluctuating electricity prices. You've seen situation in December where Northern Europe had no sun and no wind, and where electricity prices absolutely exploded. You've seen Sweden and Norway saying that they didn't want to be the buffer for Denmark and Germany anymore. You have seen the countries that have been on the forefront on solar and wind, which is UK, Denmark, and Germany, having some of the highest electricity, if not the highest electricity prices in the world. You have also seen Northvolt, the battery factory, which was a huge project in Sweden, go bankrupt. You've seen lots of actors running away from Power to X, which is based on solar and wind producing hydrogen mainly. You have seen huge plans for making energy islands in the North Sea being cancelled, and then tenders to develop massive offshore wind farms also in the North Sea had zero bidders. Not one company or organization wanted to bid for making that. And then you've seen consumers in the West turning off on electric vehicles. So there's still a demand, but it has turned out to be much harder to sell electric vehicles after you have the first enthusiastic buyers of Teslas. There doesn't seem to be a second wave of buyers for more of these vehicles. So I think that this comes as a shock for many because they thought, this you will have solar and wind and electric cars and everything will be very good. And now I think lots of people there are beginning to rethink that maybe we need something else. And I think that something else is mainly nuclear. Could also be some elements of geothermal and some elements of natural hydrogen, perhaps. But solar and wind will not do it alone. And I also think that it will take at least until the end of this century to get rid of fossil fuel. It might even take longer. Just as I said, renewables doesn't really increase market share, but fossil fuel doesn't really decrease its market share either, in spite of all the enormous efforts that have been done.
Yeah, I guess the future will also be quite energy hungry with energy needs for AI and robotics.
Yeah, so if you take server parks for AI today, it's I think it's 0.4% of electricity production in the US, for instance. So it's not so much. It will increase, but I think what is more important is that the combination of AI and robots will increase the trend growth rate of the global economy, and that means people will become more wealthy, and then it will increase the demand for everything else. So energy demand seems to be growing something like 2.6% a year right now, but that growth rate might go up quite a lot. Solar and wind cannot at all fill that, I don't think.
Great. Let's move on to number 2. This is a phenomenon that I have named the Great Disconnect. And we actually found this when we were researching for one of our Mindblowers episodes, talking about how we expect economic growth and markets to develop the next 2 decades. And what we found was that economists that forecast GDP, they forecast business as usual. They think economic growth will be really slow and not at all impacted by AI or robotics. And on the other hand, you have people like Elon Musk saying that by 2040 there will be more humanoid robots than people. And if you look at the numbers that humanoid robots, 10 billion humanoid robots would add to GDP, it would likely more than double it. So something is wrong. You might say something is rotten because the numbers are just not adding up. And I think in the coming years, this will become quite clear, and somebody needs to budge. Somebody needs to say, well, what do we actually think? I think the governments, they need to be braver in their forecasting than they've been so far.
I totally agree. I have to say that I think sometimes tech people overestimate the economic impacts of what they do, especially in the short term, and that's just because they are surrounded by other tech people, and they just see everybody around them are super fast at implementing new efficient technologies, and they underestimate how slow other parts of the economy will be at adopting this. But I think that AI and robotics are, are on a completely different level from anything we've seen yet. So as I said earlier, we in our company Supertrends, we use AI to do 500 people's work. One of the things we do is to map and predict the global innovation, and we can see, for instance, how innovation is accelerating massively these years. We're using the same methodology to track human and pre-human innovation going 3.3 million years back into the past, and then we see it go into the future. And as you can see on this graph, it just the last few years, it's absolutely exploding up. And that is mainly an effect of AI. But if you have robots that work efficiently for about $2 or less per hour, I saw Peter Diamandis, he predicted that perhaps less than $1 per hour. They work 24/7. They are not unionized. They'll do whatever you tell them. If we have hyper intelligence, then they can be connected to hyper intelligence. They can learn from each other. It's kind of difficult to imagine that this will not massively increase global GDP. And then if you have AI, which are not only reasoners, but they're innovators, that you can give you can tell an AI, this is what you have to achieve. You have to figure out yourself how to achieve it. Then it's what I would call an innovator, and that's become an expression in AI. So if you have these independent thinkers and you produce 1 billion of them and sprinkle the global economy with 1 billion PhDs essentially, or engineers that work for power, pretty much, which is close to for free, that will also massively increase global GDP. And to absolutely not take this into your models, I think is really weird, actually. So I think that we will see a, a, a change in the trend growth rate of the world economy because of these two technologies. AI is beginning to impact right now, but it begins in small pockets of the economy. But over the next 5 years, it will really, really begin to make an impact on unit labor productivity growth. And then robots after 28, as I said earlier, that will have an impact also. So if you're looking towards 2040 or 2050, I think the growth rates will become really, really high.
So now on to our final future trend, which is that more people are starting to believe that they can actually live forever. So I think the best example would be Brian Johnson. He set the goal to live to at least to 150. But if you follow him, I do think his goal is to live forever. We also talked with Aubrey de Grey, who is one of the first scientists to actually talk about longevity escape velocity, which means the day you age backwards, for a better word. So I think, it's not like this has happened in 24. I think the new thing is that suddenly you have permission to talk about it. You even have permission to hope that you might extend your own life quite a lot. And I think this is where it starts, in the way that once we can actually talk about this, then the world will start to change, because there's suddenly a belief that we are not capped at 80 or 90 or 100 years for our lifespan in just this generation.
Yes, I think there are a couple of elements in it. The first thing is that there are a number of bridging technologies to this really, really long lifespan, and that is just better healthcare. And you have health tracking technologies now where you have, you can do a blood test, blood screening, where you test not only for the usuals, but also, for instance, very early indications of 50 to 100 different cancers, and very early indications that you might have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or some neurodegenerative disease. You can do a full body MRI and so on. So these technologies makes it much easier for people to find out if something is about to go wrong and correct it. And at the same time, because of protein chemistry is getting far more efficient because of AI, where we can figure out how proteins fold in 3D. We actually calculate is 5.2 million times faster than human scientists traditionally could do it. But you also have software that now it investigates. It finds out how different proteins fold in 3D, and then it investigates if you combine this protein with this, how will that work? And then you can use that to create new vaccines, medicines, and so on. But then the second thing is the treatments that actually interfere with the aging process in itself, at a genetic level, or biochemical, or some other biochemical level. And some of these work very well in mice. There are some species that have some of them built into their own bodies, and it works very well in them. And there's every indication that within the next few years, one after another, these will be launched. So what we see among our personal friends, who are, many of them are entrepreneurs, is that many are beginning to think that if I screen my health really well, if I live more healthy than I used to, then I can stay healthy until these things come on board, and then I'll start using them as they're launched, and maybe I can massively extend my life, my life expectancy, but also my healthy life expectancy. When you and I, we do speeches and discuss with different people, we talk about all sorts of technologies. We have both noticed that when we talk about anti-aging, people get really interested because it's about their own life. Or when we interviewed Aubrey de Grey, who, by the way, coined the term longevity escape velocity, he said that he thought that this would become a mania within 5 to 6 years from now. And I think that's quite credible. It's not a mania now. It's only in small pockets of society. But I think it's building up to a mania.
Yeah, but a lot has happened this year. A guy like Brian Johnson was not very known a year ago. Now he has several million followers. So I think, this might spread quite quickly. The big question is when we'll see actual results, when we'll see actual treatments where we really roll back the years, whether that will be in 10 years' time or whether it will be more gradual. That will be super interesting to follow.
So the problem in the industry is, how do you measure the actual result? Let's say that there's some people who are living now actually will live until they're 200 years old. We cannot know that until they are 200 years old. So the industry also needs to find some uniform ways to measure biological age. There are a number of different indicators, but we need to have lots and lots of measurements where we see how that is beginning to change within people who use the cutting edge science in order to extend their life expectancy.
So Lars, we're at the end of the list, but I just wanted to ask you, so looking back at 2024, do you think the year has exceeded expectations in terms of innovation, or has it been slightly disappointing for you?
So because our company SuperTwins had predictions for the year, and the number of predictions that came through was very high, there were also some things that happened that we hadn't predicted. I think we are on trend we are at the beginning of this enormous acceleration in innovation. So I think it's not a surprise to our models or to me personally. But I think there are lots of people who are not aware of how unique this is. Because it's really an explosion in innovation that we're experiencing right now.
That was the end of our countdown of the most important future trends in 2024. The Mindblowers Podcast will be back stronger than ever in 2025, talking about the future developments changing the world we live in. We wish you a happy new year. See you next week.